Well, warm welcome to our webinar today. And Charles Savage, as you can see, is looking pretty good there in Joburg. I'm talking to you from London. I'm Alec Hogg. Charles, you guys have been doing interesting stuff. I see behind you, you have a picture, you have flags of South Africa and the USA.
Yeah, I thought I'd add it for some background decoration.
Yeah, man, it's taken you guys a long time to get to this point. The opening to the American market for South African investors is now looking increasingly exciting. We're going to be talking about that in time, but I've got a little presentation that we can go through in just a moment. Charles, before we go there, though, how long have you been thinking about this?
I mean, ever since EasyEquities was born, the whole mission is to democratize access to shares and investments. So obviously, the natural place for us to start was to build the business in South Africa. But right from the start, we wanted to create a global platform that provided access to all shares all around the world. So it's been in the plans for 2.5 years now, and we've been at it almost every day for 2 years now. So it's been a long journey to get you.
Sure, and I'm sure the admin's been quite intense as well.
Yeah, I think America's got to be the hardest market to add. The regulatory processes and hurdles that you need to jump over are not just specific to you as an organization. There were country approvals that we needed to get in order to be able to KYC and onboard customers ourselves. So South Africa needed to be approved as a trusted destination, and then as an organization, we need to get it accredited. So lots of regulatory red tape that we had to get through before we could even start building platforms and integrating to stockbrokers and negotiating price points and all that stuff.
KYC, what does that mean?
Know your client. So anti-money laundering, FICA, the equivalent of what we do here in South Africa, but for the US market.
Okay. Can you see the screen now? It says investing in the USA. Is that all coming up nice and clear? I know we've got Stuart, our managing editor, in the background. Stu, I just want to make sure that I'm not doing a PowerPoint presentation that no one's seeing.
No, Alec, great stuff.
All that. Okay, and just one last point before we go into this. Make sure everybody can hear. There is a little hand signal there. Just put your hands up, please, if you can hear us. Hey, there we go. Oh, 78, 79. 200. Okay, no more hands, thanks. We got them all. Obviously, everybody's in there. You can also see down the bottom. Actually, Stu, do you want to just explain how the questions work?
No problem, Alec. I think it's the fourth bottom tab bar on your right-hand toolbar there. There's a questions panel. If you just open up that drop-down menu, and slot in your questions in there, and then they'll feed through to Alec, and Alec and Charles can find some answers for you.
I see he's pretty relaxed now, Mr. Savage, drinking his tea. But I love this graph. I got this off LinkedIn. So you like to swim with kids. I hope those are all your own kids, Charles.
That's Clan Savage. It's quite a few years ago. I was heavier and they were younger. So I've got older, they've got older, but I've also got lighter, I'm glad to say.
And I love the lamb chops. What was that about?
Alec, if I turn my head sideways, you'll see that those. I was born with lamb chops.
It's at least the lamb chops have gone down a little bit, but no, I suppose the fashion's nothing wrong with that. Just interesting, looking through your pedigree. You've been in the internet space for a hell of a long time. What drew you to it?
You know, it's actually a funny story. I was an accountant, a very bad, failed accountant, and I was working as a management accountant at Health and Racket Club, which obviously has become Virgin Club today. And I just hated what I was doing. And one of my varsity mates, I used to see him out a lot, and he was building and selling websites, and I didn't even know what the internet was. But he was having so much fun doing it, and he was learning so much about other businesses, because every business that he had to build a website for, you had to understand what they were trying to achieve, and and then demonstrate that online. And because he was just loving what he was doing, I just said to him, listen, is there a space for an accountant? And he said, no, but there's space for a salesman. And so why don't you come and sell and build websites? And that was back in 1996. And it was right at the start of the dot-com bubble that was starting. And really the internet was so in its infancy. And I ended up building South Africa's first e-commerce websites. Interestingly, that was the first one ever to sell product online sold South African seeds, which is amazing. They were more progressive than anyone else. And then obviously got into more industries, and then stockbroking was an industry that caught my attention because I used to buy shares on Jamie Stairs at UCT, buy the telephone, and investing in shares had always intrigued me, and so I got to marry what I was doing with something that I was really interested in, and that marrying technology with financial services became a real passion of mine, and that was back in 1998. And then eventually I jumped ship when the dot-com bubble burst, stopped selling websites and building them, and then did it exclusively for GD247.com, and joined them as head of technology. That was my first job, and I was head of technology for 5 or 6 years, right the way through to 2006. I was still running technology for the group, and still today, every part of me thinks technology first. It's ingrained in who I am and what I do. It's part of my DNA now.
I want to tell you something. There's not many people in South Africa who've been in the internet space and are still there for longer than me. How's that? And you are, because I started MoneyWeb in 1997 over at my garage, and you're already in the space in '96. That's pretty fun.
Yeah, it's a good innings. We're still here, Alec.
Hey, we're still here. We're still fighting. One of the reasons why we got involved in the offshore thing, about 3 years ago, we started a portfolio with Standard Bank, and there it is. It's a global portfolio, and I can tell you that we update this every month. As you can see, we started with 2 million rand, and it's 3.8 million rand after 3 years. So it just gives you an idea of the opportunities that are available in the global market. But Charles, from your perspective, why did you want to offer US shares in particular to EasyEquities clients?
There are a couple of reasons. The first reason is that the biggest brands in the world and the most recognizable brands for our target audience, our primary target audience being millennials, are available in the US to purchase. So, I'm thinking Amazon, Google, Twitter, Facebook, Apple, Alibaba, and the list goes on. Coca-Cola, Nike, you name them. The big brands are all in the US. And for us, what we found is that people start their investment journey with shares that they love, with brands that they love. And so what better marketing tool to get people interested and engaged in investing than giving them access to those brands? And I think the average South African probably spends 8 to 10 hours a day interfacing with those brands and wearing them in their everyday life. So that was the first point. The second one, which is much more, which was for me much more interesting, is that the diversity in terms of access to investment themes, regional distribution, and products and services on the US market is second to none. So there are about 7,000 shares and ETFs available in the US, 3,500 shares, about a 50-50 split. 3,500 shares and 3,500 ETFs. And the ETFs give you access to absolutely anything you can think of. So if you want access to biotech funds or fintech funds or Asia, super companies in Asia, or startups or small caps, you name it, the thematic theme is available to invest in. And that goes from interesting niche themes all the way through to mainstream, S&P 100, Dow 30, Nasdaq 100. So for me, the US opens a world of opportunities to South Africans, and is a great first destination to get comfortable with investing in global opportunities. And it's for me the best market to open up first.
Now you started this with a game. And I actually pulled out my portfolio on the game for today. So if I'd put that $10,000 in when the game started, I'd be like $400 in front, which is quite lucky that I'm making money in the USA. But how's it been going with the game? How well supported was it?
So we had 4,400 players, and I'm pleased to say that your returns didn't feature in the top 10. So you did it right, but you didn't. The top guys made about $2,500 in a month. There was extraordinary excitement around the game, and there were some surprises for us. One is the affinity that South Africans have got for some brands that they've never been exposed to. I mean, the number one stock was Tesla. by some margin. I'm just looking at the stats now. It was about 20% ahead of Apple. Now, Apple wasn't a surprise to us that people want to go and buy Apple, but Tesla's never sold a single product in this country. Elon Musk, almost denies his South African heritage more than he embraces it, and yet South Africans absolutely love Tesla. And it was just fascinating to see that such a strong brand affinity can be created where in a market where you don't even sell product. And I guess with hindsight that's easy. I mean, if you think about the news flows that consumes our everyday lives, these brands, Tesla, Apple, Amazon, Facebook, they dominate the news flows. And so, South Africans, it's a global economy these days. It's not like when you and I grew up at where, the news flow was dominated by what happened on our bourse, and the newspapers really, had a sideline in terms of covering those international companies. Today it's very different.
Yeah, look at Tesla. I mean, there's my 4 favorite stocks. Well, all I did was I put my 4 best stocks. I love Amazon. See, that didn't perform well in the last month, but Tesla, I suppose, anybody who'd bought it in the last month will be smiling, and why not? Maybe we're basking in the halo of his genius, because everybody knows Elon Musk is such a superstar, and it's nice to know that he does come from South Africa, and in fact that his cousins, the Reeves, who are part of his business, are also from Pretoria, and in fact that his dad is still in South Africa. Errol, you can find him on Facebook if you want to. But just the other story about all of this is to do with ETFs. You mentioned that a minute ago. This is a nice picture of the Vanguard group who started ETFs, John Bogle, decades ago, and of course now it's huge in the United States. How big a part of the offering, and maybe you can unpack the offering, what exactly Easy is going to be offering to clients, but how big a part is the ETF?
So we're going to have about 50 ETFs to start with, which predominantly are the iShares and then some Vanguards as well. We did that because we focused on a universe that was digestible. In South Africa, we've got about 70 ETFs, and that's about enough for our market. In the US, as I said, there are 3,500. So we wanted to make it a digestible universe and stick with stuff that our customers wanted. So we started just with iShares, and then as a result of the game, we've had about another 15 or 20 ETFs that we've added because customers have asked for them. And when you look at them, they cover everything from a regional perspective. There isn't a region that you can't access. So worldwide ETFs and then regionally focused ETFs. You've got all coverage in terms of asset class, so bonds, equities, property, and as well as currency ETFs. So pretty much anything that you want to cover. What isn't there for now are the more thematic ETFs. I'm surprised that users haven't asked for those, so fintech, biotech, that kind of stuff. But I think that'll come in time. But the beautiful, I think what Vanguard has done and Bogle has done for investing is it's changed the game, and it's led the asset management industry for the last decade. It's increased transparency, it's brought down investor costs, and it's because of that transparency, I think it's facilitated a huge amount of education. People actually understand what they invested in. And therefore, I think that's increased engagement and interest in these products. And the cost of ownership of these things is just extraordinarily low, even when compared to what I think is a fair universe in South Africa. So if you look at South Africa, we sort of average 30 to 50 basis points in our ETFs. In the US, you can go as low as 8 basis points all the way to 25 basis points on the more exotic kind of stuff. But typically, you're going to be paying between 10 and 15 basis points for an ETF, which, in monetary terms, it's for free. So fantastic products, and South African, certainly our experience of the South African investor is about 35% of their portfolio is made up of ETFs, which is that's extraordinary. We haven't taught them to do that, but it gives them such great diversification at such a low cost, and then they can add value by picking the stocks that they want to own and improving their portfolio by getting access to things that they're really interested in.
Charles, we've got quite a few questions, so let's start hitting a few of those. The first one's from Davy Lahani, or Lahane. He says, I'm a big fan of EasyEquities. My question is about dividends. How are the US stocks dividends going to be taxed?
Yeah, so it obviously depends on, he sounds like he's South African. So from South African perspective, the tax rules will apply in the same way that they do here in South Africa. But it depends on your jurisdiction and your home tax base. So there is a withholdings tax as there is in the South African universe, and that withholdings tax will be deducted and paid across in the same way that it is for South African ETFs. So no difference from that perspective.
This one's from Johan Skutter. He says, what are the possibilities of being able to invest in Bitcoin through the EasyEquities platform?
You know,
is that an investment nowadays, Bitcoin? It's like a punt.
Yeah, so I asked this question on Twitter about a month ago. We've had huge interest in Bitcoin, and so what I did is I asked the question, are you interested in buying Bitcoin? And overwhelmingly, everybody says yes. And then the next question, I said, which of you think Bitcoin is investment grade? And the response was no. None of us think it's investment grade. So the problem for me is you've got to remember that at EasyEquities, what we're trying to do is create a long-term investment journey that creates wealth. That's the goal. We want to create wealthy individuals, and we don't want to introduce a service that could disrupt that. Now, the problem for me with Bitcoin is that whilst I believe in Bitcoin, I think Bitcoin is the future, or let's just say cryptocurrency is the future. Is it investment grade? And I think the true test will be when the US allows that ETF to go live, which is not far from now, which will be a strip of cryptocurrencies on a single asset exposure. Then for me, we'll add that rather and then give South Africans exposure through that ETF. But for now, it feels too much like a casino. It feels too much like gambling, and it just doesn't fit well. And that I'm not making judgment call. Cryptocurrencies are the future. I have no doubt, but it's just not part of a responsible investment portfolio for now.
Yeah, it's interesting. The Winklevoss twins, who were made famous in that movie of the Facebook movie, they're the guys driving the whole potential ETF. But so far, not so good, as you say, Charles. The SEC never let them get through. What interesting story about those Winklevoss twins? They competed in the Olympics, and they came 5th in the final, and South Africa came 4th. So I'm sure the rowers from South Africa will remember those guys quite well. There's a question here from, so many questions. Can you please confirm if the platform will allow investing in US dollar shares in US dollars also instead of South African rands?
Okay, so it's only going to be available in US dollars. We're not doing rand exposure to dollar shares. So if that's been confusing, we'll sort that out. But it's a dollar account, so you need to get your money offshore and then deposit into your offshore EasyEquities account, which will be dollar-based.
Okay, I think it's worth just dwelling on that for a minute, Charles. How exactly is it going to work then? You have to put your money overseas and then invest.
Yeah, so you've got to get your money offshore through the traditional channels, which are typically your bank. Unfortunately, the banks make it easy for wealthy people to do that, and not expensive if you're moving large sums of money. And my advice there is just whoever you bank with, typically they'll have a forex service that'll facilitate it in a seamless way. It's not very easy. There's some tax reporting you need to do, but it's worth it. It's worth the effort, and it's not that bad. For the smaller investor, that's where the problems start to appear. So we've researched all of the banks. On average, the minimum transaction cost of moving money offshore is about 200 Rand all in. Now, for somebody who wants to move 1,000 Rand, 2,000 Rand, that's expensive. I mean, that's 10 or 20% of their portfolio, and I would hesitate that that's not worth doing, and that's against our grain because we desperately want you guys to taste what it feels like and start investing with small amounts of money. So for now, you've got to go through the traditional channels, through your bank, and try to bargain, plead to them, make it cheaper if it's more expensive. See, and then typically they are negotiable on these kind of things. What we've done is in responding to the need that the small investor needs an avenue to get their money offshore, is we made an application to the Reserve Bank so that we can, and I don't want to use the word bulk, but I'm going to use it. It's not bulking, but what we want to do is through a single bank, what we'll aggregate all of the client requests. The bank will charge us a single transaction fee, and then we'll share that transaction fee amongst all of our customers. And in order to do that, we've got to get Reserve Bank approval. That's been pending for 4 weeks now. We expect to respond within the next 2 weeks. it's never been given, so I've got to hesitate. I've got to just put that caution out there. That the approval we're asking for has never been given. But I think the cause is a good one, and we're hoping that the Reserve Bank sees the need so that we can provide a really low-cost service for the smaller investor to get their money offshore.
I guess the other good news is, and I mean, we're all pulling for you on that one, Charles, but the other good news is that up to R1 million, you don't have to go through all the tax hoops. And for most people, R1 million is, is quite a lot of money to have in an investment portfolio. So once you get that through from the Reserve Bank, it should make it quite easy.
Yeah, I mean that R1 million allowance is fantastic, and to be honest, exchange control there is no exchange control for 99% of South Africans. I mean, we can all take as much money as we like. Yeah. The one disappointing aspect of the current rules is you can't use your credit card to fund an offshore investment account. That would have made it really easy. It's illegal to do that. Now, that's an interesting point because there are financial services providers in South Africa that are allowing South Africans to take money offshore with their credit cards. It's illegal. Now, the reason that they're doing it is that they're not domiciled here, so the Reserve Bank's not going to march into their offices and shut them down. But they will if we did it. So I think it's an old world rule that needs to change because, quite frankly, if I can buy goods and services offshore, what's more responsible, investing offshore or buying, goods and services? So we're going to see if we can, in time also get that changed because that is probably the cheapest mechanism to get money offshore is just to use your credit card.
And debit cards? Is it the same story?
Also illegal. Also illegal.
Okay. There was a question here from Jeffrey Shulman who asked if I could just put back my portfolio again so that he can have a look at it. There we go, Jeff, while we carry on answering questions. That's the portfolio that we have there. Remember, it has developed over time. Charles, Tabo Pilani wants to know, are we going to have SENS on EasyEquities? Hey, come on, Tabo. Why do you think Biznews is around, man?
Yeah, exactly. Tabo, Alec's response is 100% on the money. There are Biznews is a source. There are probably 100 sources of SENS news and people who focus on it do it better and add value to that SENS. So if you take someone like Biznews, like what Alec does, he adds value to that SENS news because if you've never read a SENS announcement, it's so bland and boring and so void of any information. It's just data. So I would encourage people to sign up to Biznews and get people to rather translate those SENS news and make them turn them into information, actionable information, rather than just what's on the tape, which for me is just so boring.
Peter Muller wants to know, he says, I've already got a US dollar offshore account from salary earnings. Will I be able to deposit the US dollars directly into a EasyEquities account for trading shares in America?
Yeah, 100%. That's exactly. You'll be able to do that straight away.
Faisal Saib, can one trade penny stocks?
No. So the universe is S&P 100, Dow 30, NASDAQ 100, and then there's a sampling of about 50 shares that users have asked us to add that they want to see on the platform. And some of those you might be classified as penny stocks. I haven't reviewed all of them. I know the smallest stock we've got on is Man United, which is against all my but there's obviously a big following, and being an Arsenal fan, it pains me to add Man United to the platform. But no penny stocks to start with. We will, I reckon, within the next 6 to 9 months, we'll add the S&P 100 small caps because I think there's some real value in those, and it's not a liquidity problem. So that people understand, why did you reduce the universe? It's not because we're trying to dictate where your money goes. The real reason is that in order to keep the costs low, we have to restrain the investable universe, because literally if we double it, we double the cost. We triple it to triple the cost. There's no efficiency in that mechanism for us. So we have to build the audience, and as we build the audience, the users, the clients, then we'll build the investable universe. Otherwise, what we would end up with is a very expensive access point to buy shares, and that doesn't speak to easy. So, I understand that there are probably shares that you want to access that aren't going to be available to start with, but in time, that will grow as the user base grows, and I would guess that over the next 2-3 years, we'll have the whole of, if we have the same experience we've had in South Africa, then we'll have the whole US universe within 2 to 3 years.
We've got a lot of questions here, Charles. We're not going to get through them in the time that we've allowed ourselves, but James Smith asks, will we spend rands or dollars to invest in the USA? How will rands be converted to dollars?
Yeah, so that's, again, that he's got to convert that himself through his traditional bank processes. So he would withdraw the money out of his EasyEquities Rand account, then book the Forex through his bank, and then deposit the money in his offshore EasyEquities account. As I said, in time, we are looking to solve that so that you can do it on the platform. But we've got no timelines on that, and we'll keep our users posted.
Odron Gurta wants to know, why am I muted? Odron, there are 310 people on this webinar now. If everyone started talking at once, it sounds like the Tower of Babel. But let's move on to Anzani Nefalama, who says, Charles, Alec, when is it going to open? When do we start buying US shares?
Yeah, so the launch date is 4th of September. There are a couple of, the stars have to align, and currently the stars are aligned. That's the good news. Everything's on track. 4th of September is the launch date. If it moves, guys, it'll move by days, not weeks. There's tiny approval processes that are going on. We're swapping our technology on the platform, price feeds, and a whole lot of stuff. But right now, 4th of September, and if it moves, it'll be a couple of days. So certainly, you know, within 2 or 3 days of the 4th of September is the worst case scenario.
Is that Monday? Have I got the day right?
I don't actually know. I haven't got a calendar.
Well, today's the 29th of August, okay, so that's cool. I'm just having a look here on it is Monday. Oh, what a bad guess. Not a bad guess.
Monday, there we go, Monday.
And Tennis Meritz wanted to know, maybe touch on the process of conversion from South African Rand to US dollars via EasyEquities. Is there no conversion?
No, we're not going to do the conversion for now. We'll solve it in time.
Can EasyEquities trades be paid for via an offshore dollar account?
Yeah, so you can deposit money from an offshore dollar account into your US custodial account.
Will our US stocks be dollars? So if the Rand goes down, then my offshore stocks are still intact?
Yeah, 100%. There's no dollar Rand cross currency in it. It's a dollar account. Dollars go up. Your value in Rands obviously goes up.
Here's my pal Derek Labner. He says, love EasyEquities. Are you going to have a mobile app anytime soon? I'm a loyal customer of CMC Markets here in the UK, and their apps across phones and pads are excellent and drive transactions and volumes. So bring yours on, Charles.
No, Derek, it's a great question, and maybe an opportunity just to say why we haven't got an app so far. So, as you can tell from the platform, if you've been along for the journey and the ride for the last 2.5 years, the functionality set changes about 2 to 3 times a month. That's how often we release. The platform gets released in some weeks. Like this week, we've got to release Monday, Wednesday, Friday of new functionality. That's obviously gearing up for the US launch. But because of that, in the app world, it's very difficult to do that kind of have that kind of flexibility in your development cycle. And what you end up doing is splitting your resources towards app and then web, and you're running 2 development streams the whole time. Now, you would have recently noticed we've raised capital from Sanlam. We've taken a 30% stake, and that is to address the fact that, you know, we've been building this business out of the income statement of the Purple Group, which has cost us a lot of money that nobody really pays us for, to be honest. If you look at our share price, no one has appreciated the fact that we built this asset out of our income statement. And now raising the 100 million from Sanlam allows us to accelerate some of the development, and the number one development, which will be good news for the users, that has been prioritized from a user perspective, is now the development of an app. So that work is going to start as a result of this transaction with Sanlam, and I'd expect that the development cycle will be about 6 months, and that we will be launching an app in sort of February next year, which we are as excited about, and yeah, I really look forward to launching that into the market.
Rulani Kubai wants to know, are we going to buy US equities in the same way as we do the South African ones, through fractional share ownership?
Yeah, I mean, we wouldn't have launched. It's not easy without fractions. And fractions, funny enough, the invention of fractional shares is accredited to the US. There are 2 markets in the world where you can actually own a fraction of a share, and have been able to own a fraction of a share since they opened the exchange. So in the US, I think the NYC has been around over 100 years. So you're going to be able to own a fraction of any listed US company, and you are going to be the beneficial shareholder of that share. So let's take Berkshire Hathaway, which I know is one of your favorites, Alec. I mean, just imagine the access now. South Africans can buy $1 or $10, $100, whatever they want, and get access to that, which for me is probably the best ETF. I know it's not an ETF, but it's an ETF run by the best money manager in the world. So, wonderful to be able to give people fractional access to those shares.
Yeah, and he's beaten the ETFs consistently over time, beaten the S&P 500. That is our Warren Buffett. I'd like to know, are the US stocks going to be quoted in dollar terms on the EasyEquities platform?
Yeah, that's dollar terms.
What would the difference be between buying S&P 500 through the US stocks compared with buying it through core shares, S&P 500 ETF?
Yeah, that's a good. I mean, obviously in the core share product you have rand risk, which influences the price fluctuations and will increase the volatility of that product because rand is a volatile asset. So that's the first difference, is that you're buying a dollar product and there's no rebasing it to rands. The second one is cost. So it's much cheaper to buy the S&P 500 from a US ETF issuer, because what happens in the case of the core shares and the other product providers is they actually end up buying those same underlying ETFs, and then they price it up slightly to make a margin, deservedly, because they're using, they bring it to the South African market, listing it here. There's costs and marketing costs associated with and running that product. But it's going to be cheaper for you to buy an S&P 500 in the US, and in addition to that, you're not going to have the rand risk that you would otherwise have in that product listed on the JSE.
There's Tom van der Merwe wants to know, how does IDX futures compare with EasyEquities offering? Same story.
Yes, I mean, IDX. I'm just trying to. Okay, got it. I'm just trying to remember what IDX is. I'm not being facetious. I just that is Investec's futures on international shares. So futures are obviously leveraged, geared instruments. There's a cost of funding associated with it. They're higher risk than a fully funded equity position. And as a result of that, they will definitely be more expensive to purchase and to own than buying the underlying.
I wish to purchase, says Bo Bachner, I wish to purchase $100,000 iShares Emerging Market ETF BlackRock. Will I be able to do this through EasyEquities?
100%.
Okay, and then thanks, answered. Yo, my goodness. Charles, I think let's give it another 5 minutes. We did say half an hour, but we'll give it another 5. There's so many questions here. Is there an outlook to open up access to other markets, such as the London Stock Exchange, TSE, and emerging markets such as Bovespa?
Yeah, that's also a great question. I mean, the other part of raising capital wasn't just about building platforms. The other part of it was to take EasyEquities global. So within the next 6 months, we will name another market that we're going to enter, and we'll have concrete plans around entering that market. My best guess at now, and where the research is being done, my best guess is that market will be Australia. And there's just the platform has got a lot of attributes that we think are going to be very appealing in the Australian market, which is actually a very expensive market to access. So the average transaction cost in Australia about $70, which is really high by any world standards. But there are other attributes other than cost that we think will work in Australia. So Australia looks like the favored next market, and there we'll actually physically set up an office and a partnership with a local broker. And we will sell our products directly into that market. And as a result of that, you'll have access to the Australian market. Our partner on the ground there used to work with me. He was COO of G777. He's now CEO of a company called Open Markets, which is the fastest growing fintech stockbroker in that region. And what's great about their business is they focus on B2B, and they focus on opening up and enabling other markets. So when we integrate to him, we will get access not just to Australia, but also to Singapore, to Malaysia, to Hong Kong, and a handful of other markets in that region. So Australia looks like the next port of call, and I would, within the next 12 months, before this time next year, to have access to that market on the ground, and then at the same time open up the Asian region. And why that region is interesting for us is that Australia is surrounded by emerging markets. And for us, we think that the lessons we've learned are best applied in other emerging markets. So we want to focus our strategy on doing what we've done here in South Africa in other emerging markets. And Australia gives us a good beachhead to be able to access those markets, because the time zone to run it from South Africa just doesn't work.
Brilliant work. Just this last question from Paul Weir says, still not 100% sure on the banking requirements. To invest in US stocks, are we required to register a foreign bank account on the EasyEquities platform? If this, does it have to be a US account? If not, can we simply register an account with a South African bank and put cash into it?
Okay, let me try and simplify it, because it is, I mean, it can get quite confusing. So the first thing is you've got to open up an EasyEquities US account. Now, as a FECAD registered member of our community, you'll automatically be able to do that. If your FECA is out of date, then there might be some documentation that you would need to supply, and there are 1 or 2 extra terms and conditions applicable to the US market that you have to read and sign. So, but that's easy. That's all digital, and you'll be able to do that in the same process that you opened your EasyEquities account. The second thing, in terms of, so now you've got an EasyEquities account, you don't need to open up a foreign bank account. What you need to do is use your local account to take money offshore, and that you can do through your through all the major banks. So FNB, Standard Bank, ABSA, Nedbank, Investec. They've all got the ability to send money offshore to a foreign destination, and we'll give you the banking details, and the banking details look exactly the same as our local details, they're just foreign. And you will then deposit with your EasyEquities reference number into that account, and when that money settles, it will automatically go into your EasyEquities account. Now, the benefit of having an offshore bank account is that if you don't have an offshore bank account, when you withdraw money, it has to come back to South Africa. So it has to come back to your South African domiciled account. The benefit of having an offshore bank account is that that money can exit our EasyEquities account in the future, if you want to access that cash, into a US bank account. And people shouldn't be terrified by the prospect of opening an offshore account. There is so much good fintech happening in that space. You can open a foreign bank account very easily these days at a very low cost, and so that shouldn't be something that scares people. But you don't have to have one. You just have to have one if you want to use those dollars. Let's say you go on holiday and you want to access your US dollars, then you'd rather have them in the US account.
Just to close off with, we will be covering the Biznews SA portfolios on Biznews, but to do that, you've either got to be invested in them, so you'd be invested in this bundle, which is the SA Champions with Easy, or you have to be a member of Biznews Premium, and we're running a special this month on Biznews Premium that you can actually go in and sign up. You get your first month for free. If you like it, you carry on. If you don't like it, you don't carry on. But it's at £4.99 a month. It's best investment I think you're ever going to see. There was a last. There are like 72 questions here, so we're never going to get through them all. Otherwise, we'll take you out of your work, and your shareholders are going to be pretty peed off. But Derek Lubner did say, "Where can we sell Arsene Wenger?" I suppose there.
I can make the trading more expensive if you like.
Listen. As a West Ham United fan, I think you guys are actually sitting in heaven compared with where we are right now. But that's great. What we will do, we will put this webinar on. It'll be on online, so accessible, as with a full tape. And then there are so many questions. So what I'll do, Charles, is we'll get the questions together, put them at the bottom of the webinar with a transcript, and maybe you and your team can address them.
I was just going to ask you to do that. I mean, that's a great opportunity. We're currently building our US FAQs, so it'll help us as well in terms of determining the sort of repetitive questions that we need to answer. So thanks very much to the guys listening in, and thanks very much for your questions. If there are any you have afterwards, please, ask them, publish some more questions. That's what we need to understand, is what are the things that you're not comfortable with, or that you need more answers on, and we'll deal with it quickly.
I mean, there's one guy who's been complaining all the way through that he couldn't hear anything. Well, anyway, I'm sorry, but it must be your computer that's wrong, because everybody else seems to be okay and to being able to hear it. Charles, hey, it's a pleasure, man. You see, yeah, behind me is this called a radiator, and in England you have them in every room. Just proves I am in London right now, even though it's quite nice and sunny outside. But instead of radiators in Joburg, you just need jerseys.
Yeah. Alec, thanks so much for having us on. I mean, we really appreciate the support. Really excited about this initiative, and looking forward to listing your international bundle on the platform as well. I think that's a great way for investors to start, and joining your community and having these kinds of discussions every month. What better way to get started?
No, for sure. And the disruption that you're doing is world class. We see the rest of the world from here. What you guys are doing at Easy in South Africa, nobody else is doing. So keep it up. Keep waving the flag. And the story you told us about Australia sounds really awesome. Hopefully the markets nearby Australia you're talking about will include Hong Kong, and then we can go into Tencent directly, which is a very difficult share to buy into when you're sitting in most parts of the world. So good for you, Charles. Lovely talking again. And to everybody else, we will be putting all of those questions up as soon as Charles and the team have had a chance to answer them, together with a transcript of this. It'll be on Biznews and on the Easy website as well. So till the next time, cheers, man.
Cheers.